This is Rustin Rose with Access Entertainment and Metalholic Magazine, and with us today, one of the legends of rock music, the fantastically talented Mark Bell, a.k.a. Marky Ramone. How are you doing, my friend?
All right. Braving the storm here in New York City, but everything's okay.
Well, first off, congratulations on the book, Punk Rock Blitzkrieg, My Life as a Ramone. I got to imagine writing the book was as much about setting the record straight as it was about telling your story.
Yeah, what did you think of the book?
I love the book. I thought it was very intriguing. You definitely delved into the stories, the background of the guys in the band and your path, but you didn't shy away from talking about the stuff that really impacted you, and I think that was very telling.
Yeah, and I took the high road. I didn't want to be insulting to anybody. I just wanted to describe our personalities. It was time. 15 years in the group, 1,700 shows. So there's a lot of information that I had to reveal in the book, and to me it is the most comprehensive one. So, I think it's definitely valid that I took the time out to write this.
Absolutely, and I thank you for sharing it as both a music lover and as a Ramones fan. Now, but let's go back a little bit, because before you were Marky Ramone, you were Mark Bell, and you began your career with the quietly influential proto-metal trio Dust. You were still in high school, I believe, when you recorded that record.
Well, there were two of them.
Well, the first one, yeah.
We were all in high school. The guitar player just graduated, Richie Wise, and we had a local band, but it was amazing at that age and time that we got signed to a major record label. And the reason was not because it was because in America there weren't really that many heavy metal bands compared to what was happening in Europe. So we just wrote the first album was written before Black Sabbath even came to America, but they were already established in England. So we wanted to just play heavy music, and that was the result. The two Dust albums, and Kenny Aronson's on bass, and we had to stop because I had to finish school. Kenny ended up playing with Stories, and Richie produced the first two Kiss albums. So I just started playing with people who I admired. I did an album with Andrew Loog Oldham, who was producer of the Rolling Stones,
right,
in the 60s for a band called Estes. And then I did a blues album with Johnny Shines, who was an authentic, real Mississippi Delta blues player who hung out with Robert Johnson. And then I started hanging out in New York City, the punk scene.
Right.
But Dust was definitely one of the top 5 metal bands in America in 1971.
Oh, yeah, Stone Woman from a Dry Camel. I still go back and listen to those albums. So I actually talked to Richie a couple years ago when you guys did the reissues. But now, your early years were tied to some really enigmatic characters as well, like Wayne County and Richard Hell. How did those experiences, as well as being in Dust and the other projects you were just mentioning, how did that sort of prepare you for the Ramones?
Well, Jane wanted me in his band, so we went to an audition, like everything else, that I did, even with Richard Hell and the Ramones. There's always some kind of you have to see if everything works out together, which it did. And being with Wayne, that's what he was called back then, he was really over the top. A lot of clubs wouldn't book him, only basically in New York City. So I wanted to go further than that, and a year and a half I was with him. We had a great time. He was a great songwriter. He had a great southern drawl in his vocal delivery, and he had great lyrical content. And we had a ball. We had a great time. But people weren't coming out of the closet yet about their sexual preferences, but he did, and a lot of people couldn't accept it. So it was time to move on, and that's when Richard Hell asked me if I would join the Voidoids.
And now, you knew Joey, Dee Dee, and Johnny from the local scene before you joined. What was sort of your take on the band as you watched them early on?
Well, they were a little, they weren't tight yet. They were only playing 20 minutes, 25 minutes a set. And this was the early days of CBGBs. And they didn't solidify their image yet, of what I noticed. And CBGBs really was there for the kind of music that we were playing, but the thing was, it really was a place to hone your skills, to get better and keep coming back and playing, get a better, a larger audience, and build a following, which every band started doing who was playing there in 74, 75. So that's what I observed about the Ramones. Every time they would come back, they got tighter and tighter, added more songs to this set, and eventually they'd play a half-hour set, then a 40-minute set. So they used to come see my groups before there was the Ramones. They were fans of Dust, and they knew about the Voidoids, so they knew about my drumming. That's why when Tommy left, he decided to tell them to have me, consider me to play the drums. So it was really a lot to do with Tommy getting me involved with the band.
Right. Well, and the Ramones had released 3 albums when you joined, but you were actually truly the veteran musician by that time, having done the albums with Dust and worked with Wayne County and doing the Blank Generation with the Voidoids. How did your experience coming in impact the progression of the Ramones?
Well, I played heavier than Tommy, and I tuned the drums a little higher, especially the snare. I added a few rolls which I felt were needed, and that was basically it. I was just playing the style that was needed for that kind of music. I adapted, like I did with the Voidoids and Dust. So through my experience recording 5 albums before I joined the Ramones, I knew what I had to do. You can't overplay anything, and you can't underplay anything. You just have to play to the song.
And Road to Ruin, it remains my favorite album, Ramones album, but many see it as the seminal Ramones album. What are your thoughts on that?
Loved it. When I first heard it after we recorded it, that was one of my favorite albums. I liked the first 3. I liked the 3-chord thing. But the Road to Ruin had to be a little more. It had to, because you can't keep on going and doing 3-chord albums for the rest of your life. You have to insert things into it to make it to show some kind of growth. So I think that album was definitely, as they say, our Sgt. Pepper,
Well, now in the book, you detail some of the flaws and frailty of yourself and your fellow Ramones, your alcoholism, Johnny's control issue, Dee Dee's drug problems, Joey's compulsive behavior. But in doing so, you humanize the band. Did you start the book with that in mind, or did that just sort of come out naturally as you started telling the story?
Well, everybody, wherever I go around the world, would always ask me, what do you guys like? Well, what was, Joey like, Dee Dee like, Johnny like, So to write a book, it can't just be fluff. You have to really delve inside of what was going on in each situation, whether it was a live show, whether it was being in the van, whether it was hanging out with the group members. So through my observance, that's what I put in the book of each individual, including myself, which I was brutally honest about. A lot of writers aren't, but I was. I didn't have to put that whole thing in there about my rehab stints and my drinking problem at that time. But if I'm going to describe other people's personalities, you have to be very, very blunt about yourself.
And it came out very, very real, and that's one of the things that makes the book so strong. And it wasn't just talking about the other guys. You did talk about yourself and gave us some real insight into it. And one of the things that struck a chord for me is you were basically a quarter of a century into knowing these guys when, your 3 brothers in the band all passed away like in a 3-year period of each other. That had
so
to...
Tommy.
Yeah, and then Tommy last year. But the 3 of them together that you spent so much time on the road with, 1,700 shows, all that stuff, that really had to strike home.
Yeah, it's death is a horrible thing. I mean, especially if you're very close to somebody like that, 15 years, and they were my brothers, they were my bandmates, they were business associates. Brothers argue, you make up. Bandmates argue, you make up. But in the end, when the death came knocking on their doors, the reality of it really hit home. It was like, with all our differences, in the end, you were never going to see them again, and that's what really hit home to me. And I just try to think of the good times that we had, and the legacy of the music, and how the legacy is just continues to grow and grow and grow. So that's how I try to deal with all that. I mean, it was like a family member.
Right. When you began your career 45 years ago, musicians had short shelf lives. The music industry and technologies have changed so much over the years. The rock star mystique has been replaced by fan interaction through social media. Does it ever seem surreal to you looking back at it all?
It's a great adventure. It still is. I still tour all over the world, and I see the new generation of Ramones fans. But, in life, in anything, there's always going to be ups and downs, no matter how much money you have, no matter how famous you are. The whole idea is to pick yourself up and just continue and be the best you can be. But, the social internet, in a lot of ways, is a good thing. In a lot of ways, it can be a negative thing. As long as you use it correctly and right, it could really help you as a individual, and it could expand and broaden your horizons,
Absolutely. Now, last question here before we get out of here. What, in your mind, is the biggest misconception about the Ramones?
Oh, another question people would ask. Are you guys real brothers? So, no, we're not. It's funny. A lot of people... that was one of the questions that was asked a lot. And I would just goof around and go, yes, we were all joined at the hip when we were born. So we weren't brothers. We were just bandmates who loved playing the same music, and were in the right place at the right time.
And what an impact you guys made. It still carries on, one of the greatest legacies in rock music. Marky Ramone, thank you so much for taking the time. We look forward to whatever you're going to create for us next, listening to your radio show. Fantastic. And thanks for a fantastic book.
Thanks.